Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Japes Drew This. I am your host and illustrator, Jean-Paul Deschamps. I am the creator of the graphic novel series Sons of Fate and the founder of Blackberry Juice Publishing. Today, I am drawing a poster print for the second volume of Sons of Fate Legacy. So jumping into what I'm doing here basically is composition. I have to draw a picture, an illustrative picture that doesn't tell a story, but basically entices you to look into what you're looking at without giving away what's actually going on. So in doing that, basically what I'm doing is setting up the intrigue by showing you the establishing characters of the second volume, and doing so in a way where there's nothing given away that is apparent. Those who have read the first volume of Sons of Fate may see something or see things and notice who's there and who's new, who's been there before, and what's changed. But again, it doesn't give away much of the story. So in constructing a composition where your eye leads, what's going to intrigue you, I usually try to go for the main character being in the middle, the supporting characters being on the sides and up top, or surrounding the character. And in this case, as you can see, although I didn't draw it specifically in that tune of mind where it came to detail, and clearly I'm all over the place, but that is how I draw. It's in my head already, and once it's in my head, the process works all by itself, I would say. You can see that the main protagonist is clearly being drawn in the middle, and that's Kamau. And he has two supporting characters which are new to the series on the sides of him, and the supporting protagonist from the first story above. And placement in this is also important because the main protagonist is the one in the middle, and in doing so, you understand the stories about him, while his mentor, who above him, overshadows basically the entire picture and the importance of where he is in terms of the story. Almost an illustrative version of a guardian angel, if you will, where the ideology flows from top to bottom. As you can see, once the drawing gets done, I may add a few details here and there. You can give it a little look over, make sure that the blueprint is basically where I want to go, and whatever changes happen pretty much in the next phase, which is going to be where the line work is. Occasionally I'll go in and tighten up some things here and there. And for the most part, that's pretty much where I've laid down all the basics and all the stuff that I'm pretty sure is going to be, or is going to end up where I want it to. Although things can change in the process, I have been known at times to change my mind regardless of where I'm at. But this is basically the loosest form where the most interpretation will come in. There's a zoom in, as you can see. Next, what I do is I lay over a clean piece of paper and light box what I did. That way, I get to draw on a clean piece of paper, which is important, but I also can make the minor adjustments I need to make without changing the overall composition of the piece. This is the stage where I've decided what I'm going to do with the actual breakdown. I'm happy with where it is, and I start placing down the final ink work and line work into what's going to become the final illustrative piece. If there are things to be changed or moved around, I can do that without disrupting the sketch. I find a lot of times when I go work from one piece of paper, from sketch to line work to finished art, if there are things I have to change and I change them, sometimes I throw off the composition. And in doing so, the whole piece gets ruined. I start from scratch over again. So this is more of a dotting I's and crossing T's to make sure that that doesn't happen as much, because a lot of my process is in the actual inking than it is in the pencils. Pencils is a very rough sketch. Personally, I would say there are times where it's chicken scratch. I have the idea in my head and it's more placement of where things go. The detail comes into these parts here, where I'm basically doing shapes. So in this part right here is where a lot of the detail comes in. A lot of the finalized composition a lot of the unencumbered positive and negative space comes in, and I basically do the detail of the characters and or places of things. As you can see, it is basically where everything comes into place in terms of where the composition was planned out in stage one. And you see right there, I moved it a little bit because one of my protagonist's head was probably clipping the top of the paper. And knowing that in the sketch, I planned already to crop that when I saw it. So it wasn't something that's going to really change what I was doing as much as it is knowing that that was going to be a little high. When I do pages, it's exactly that too. Sometimes I even go on my computer, shrink them down a little bit, just to make sure that the composition works within the panel. You guys can see that I'll do an illustrative page on how I construct a comic book page. You can see my process in that too, but it's basically the same thing. I compensate for where it's going to fit in the space and where that thing can and cannot overlap, and I make adjustments as I go through. But this stage is usually where it gets laid out, because outside of correcting with a whiteout pen, there is really no going back, even though I've been known to do that too. Sometimes I change my mind, sometimes it doesn't look as good as I thought it would, and you know, Murphy's Law is always in effect. I always try to dot as many I's and cross as many T's as I can to make sure. As you can see, I readjusted the image there because one head being lowered raised the other head higher, and now this head is where it was supposed to be, and I can go ahead and put him back without again altering the whole composition of the piece. So we put the detail into my character here, and that should be the entire piece. I'll stop talking for a little bit, let the music work, enjoy the ambiance. I'll try to stop talking. I'm not good at that. I can talk a lot. So, a lot of the detail goes in here. And as you can see, it's a lot of the final work, although most of the detail goes into the end. So there you go, which is basically the line work of the piece. The next step is the finishes. So here is where we go and separate all the lights and darks. This is the final phase of the black and white. This is where I basically, whether I color it or not, I'm thinking about where color would be if this piece is going to be colored. A lot of times I do think that way, although it doesn't need to be colored for me to do so, but it also helps in thinking about a light source in terms of where the shadows lie in order to give my illustration a more realistic look. Light source can be in many places for many things, but that doesn't mean that because it can be that it works out in a way that is conducive to what you're trying to pull off. In this case, I actually have the light, as you'll see in the colored version, this is going to be colored. I wanted to have the idea of the light emanating from the middle out. And thinking about that in the process, I really didn't really worry about other light sources intentionally, because I understood that the main protagonist of the story was going to be where the light emanated from, and all the other colors and lights would be secondary. So I started to place a lot of my darks in the actual center, and then it emanates outwardly as it goes. At this point, I wasn't really sure what colors I was going to use, but I did know that I wanted to do that. And I think it's important, again, to understand where your lights and darks are. I'm a big fan of contrast. I think it's the key to composition. And in that, I have done many a piece where I love the line work, and I go in there and I get very laissez-faire, as you will, with my lights and dark choices, and ruin the whole piece. And it'll have to start over again, because at that point I cannot use enough whiteout to even fix that piece, and it ends up being a total mess where it's better off to just start again. So I think it's very, very important to kind of understand, even in theory, I would say, where your lights are going to be and how they play out in shaping not only the characters you're creating, the places you're creating, but also the composition. Because placing darks and lights really matters on where your eye goes and where it doesn't go. There's a lot of reference you can use in terms of doing so. Movies do that. I watch a lot of movies in black and white, especially anything Spielberg, anything that his cinematographer did. I forgot his name right now. I don't remember what it was. But composition is key for me. And I really try to nail what I want you to see first, second, or equally in a piece. And a lot of that comes from where I place my positive and negative space. And that's basically lighting. For me, it's not so much lighting as much as it is creating the ambiance of lighting. And in doing so, it ends up being everything incorporated into that. I'm finishing up the blacks here. I'll go in and I'll add some shadow. I'll add some more shapes. I'm going to add some texture. But I'm really going in there and making sure that all the places I need are accentuated in the way they have to be accentuated. A lot of the final detail goes in. A lot of the final finishing flourishes go in. I add texture in some of the fabric, worn, new. I don't really touch flesh, and I don't tend to crosshatch unless it's some kind of speed motion. Again, I'll do a how-to or a process of one of my pages, and it'll be action page where I'll show you where I do crosshatching. I like crosshatching. I'm not a fan. I just don't crosshatch. So that's usually skin, and in that I just let bold shapes tell the tale. So as you can see now, I go in, fill in the blacks in certain spots to kind of accentuate where I want you to look. I go in and fix any line that is off. I start adding texture in the background to kind of blend in and out what I want the picture to be. And there's the whiteout where I kind of add detail within the shadow, because even in shadow there are highlights and darks to accentuate that there is shape that goes on beyond the darkness and lightness of the main structures of the positive and negative space. Adding little details into the shadows really enhances a picture for me. I go in and actually play with a lot of the shadows and texture within the background in order to add ambiance. And then lastly, I go in with a little whiteout pen, sometimes a big one, depending on what I need to do, and add little flourishes, basically hairs, again, fabric, wear and tear within clothing or items. So swords have little, if I'm doing weapons, I'll have like scratches on them. And in order to create the space, I'll make I'll create something with a positive and negative space, and then go in and add the details within the dark part of the structure to show that it does have volume. So this is just kind of the finishing touch of that. Just making sure everything's there and put in the proper places, and I'm happy with everything. Taking a step back, going in, adding black and white where it's needed, or I think it would look. There you go. There's the finished ink. We'll do a pan down of the final. And this is the final color. There you go. Japes Drew This, Sons of Fate Legacy. Hope you enjoyed. Join my Patreon to get a print of that. illustration. And be sure to check out the critically acclaimed graphic novel series Sons of Fate, available at Blackberry Juice Publishing at blackberryjuice.net. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, see you soon.